Hey guys, Mr. SLIN here talking about TF2, and today I want to talk to you about why the Pyro is in such desperate need of a rework. For those of you guys who've been following TF2 recently, in the Meet Your Match update, they announced that they were going to rework both the Heavy and the Pyro, and there was going to be a bit of a war, a voting war to see which class would get the first rework, and Pyro won that vote. So I want to go over why the Pyro needs a rework. Like, what does the Pyro do in the current meta game, and what his role is in this whole thing. Her role, his role, I don't know. So what the Pyro's role is in all of this, and kind of then go into like how you could rework the Pyro, what it needs, and why this next update is going to be so important to the future of TF2, and it'll show the direction that Valve is taking with the game. So let's start with the Pyro's current role. I'm not going to make it a secret here. I'll make it publicly known that Pyro is my least favorite class to play. I absolutely despise playing Pyro. It's just not fun for me. I think the most interesting aspect of playing Pyro is the sort of reflecting aspect of that class, that sort of reactionary, you have projectiles coming towards you and you right click at the proper time in order to air blast the projectiles back at the enemy. I think that is where the Pyro really shines. I think that's his best attribute. Everything else outside of that is so mediocre, it's just not fun for you to play. The Pyro has very limited movement capabilities. In fact, half the other classes can move better than the Pyro can. And if the Pyro does want to move a little bit faster, you can use a melee unlock in order to walk a little bit faster, but I just don't think that you have to have that kind of thing in order to make the class good. Like, that shouldn't be a requirement. The class just has no fun movement options outside of that. You could say that detonator jumping is a little bit of a fun movement mechanic, but like, it's really not that much fun. And that's just so I don't like the movement options on Pyro. I also don't like its primary weapon. The flamethrower just seems like a really crappy primary weapon. It doesn't really kill anybody quickly. It just kind of tickles you to death. Oh, sorry. It doesn't really kill anybody quickly. It just kind of tickles you to death. And there is a sort of element of like, maybe you decide to run the back burner and you can try and kill people quickly. But I feel like that does such a poor job in comparison to what the spy does, or what the scout does, or what the sniper does. It's just like, if you're going to try and kill people quickly, you should go for a pick class, or you should go for a short range damaging class like the scout, or maybe even the heavy. Those classes I feel excel in damage per second. So the Pyro doesn't really do well in the damage per second category, doesn't really do well in the movement options category. For its secondary weapon, you can either use a shotgun, which basically makes it the same thing as an engineer or a scout or a shotgun heavy. So I just feel like it's really bad. And then you could potentially use a flare gun. I think the flare gun is probably one of the most necessary additions that they added to Pyro, just because it gives the Pyro the needed range that it absolutely has to have. Without it, it would just be a short range nightmare of a class. So I think that the flare gun and the detonator and all those kinds of weapons are good because they extend the range of the Pyro. I think the flare gun itself is actually interesting because it's like a skill shot. You have to light the person on fire and then hit a second skill shot on them to do damage. I think that's kind of interesting. I just feel like that is so much more difficult to do than just hitting someone with a headshot, or ambassador headshotting them, or just throwing stickies at them from range, or rockets at range. I just feel like those are better options. So again, the Pyro just sucks in that aspect. And then for melee options, you have this sort of like combination. Again, if someone's on fire, I use a melee weapon in combination with that. I think that's interesting, but everyone kind of already knows in the back of their mind that melee weapons are not supposed to be a primary way that you kill somebody. I just feel like the whole thing in general just kind of sucks. So the other thing that's really confusing too is that the Pyro, if you look at the class lumpings that Valve has made, they lump Pyro in the offensive category. And I really feel like that's a miscategorization of what the class is supposed to be, because the Pyro is not an offensive class. At the highest levels of the game, if you're playing Pyro properly, there's no way you can possibly be offensive with that class. It doesn't have the mobility, it doesn't have the movement options that you need to close the gaps in order to actually do damage. You got the short range weapon and no movement capabilities to close the gap. it just makes it such a miserable class to play. Really what you're doing is you're kind of just like a janitor with a broom, just like shoving your way forward, just pushing your way forward. And you got this air blast mechanic that helps you push through chokes and stuff, but I don't think that's considered offensive. In my mind, that's considered more defensive. You're using the air blast to defensively protect your team, to reflect projectiles away from your team. That's defensive to me. That's not really considered offensive in my mind. So I feel like it's a miscategorization. And Valve kind of knows this in the back of their mind. Like when you look at the very first class to get a class update, it was the Pyro, because they knew that Pyro's toolkit just kind of sucked. And so what they did was they gave them the Backburner. That was the very first weapon they gave the Pyro. The Backburner at the time they gave it to him was just so overpowered. It was just so much better than everything else because there were no other unlocks for other classes. And the Backburner just gave you like a health buff, and it gave you just the Backburner crit. It was a win-win. There was no downside. There was no downside for the air blasting at the time wasn't really a thing. So I just feel like they really needed to try and rework Pyro, and over time it just started sort of showing the weaknesses of Pyro. As other classes get their updates, those classes have very defined roles in the team. I think at the highest levels of TF2, and which maybe not applied to most players, but I just feel like the Pyro, when you look at how it's used in those situations, it's really just used as a defensive class when you can't run an extra, like the rules of competitive don't let you run 2 heavies, don't let you run 2 engineers, and so you basically just run a Pyro because you might as well. Otherwise you would run 2 engineers. So yeah, it's not good. So what is Valve gonna do to fix the Pyro? What are they gonna do to make this situation better? This class has a short range weapon with no gap closing capabilities, so he's basically stuck to sticking with the combo. He's stuck to sticking with the medic, and he's often relegated to spy checking duty, which isn't really that necessary. Like if you're looking to cut stuff from your team, as far as the team composition goes, the first thing you can cut is spy checking capabilities, because any single player on the team has natural spy checking capabilities. They can turn around, they can shoot enemies and check for spy that way. You could just, like, if you're a sniper, for example, you could Jarate somebody, or if you were a heavy, you could just literally just minigun into somebody until you find out if they are a spy or not. So I just feel like there's a lot of options for other classes to check for spies. Pyro isn't absolutely necessary to your team composition in order for your team to succeed. And what they need to do to Pyro is they have a choice. They can either leave him in a sort of situational state and buff his situational utility so that when the situation arises, you can throw the Pyro in and he's the perfect match for that situation. An example for that would be how the Pyro is really good at air blasting enemy Ubers. So when an Uber comes in, you can air blast and juggle that Uber up in the air so that Uber is effectively nullified. That is a cool situation. Maybe you could buff the air blasting capabilities against Ubers, for example, to sort of give the Pyro that sort of cemented role on the team that, hey, when you want a class that can counter Ubers, you're going to pick the Pyro every time. That makes sense, right? So you can either give him the sort of situational tools that are needed, or you can sort of give him a little bit of everything. Like, what does the Pyro desperately need right now more than anything else? The Pyro desperately needs either movement, like gap closing abilities, or he needs long range capabilities. And that kind of would need to signal to the entire community that that's how they plan on doing the future revamps. That's how they plan on revamping heavy. That's how they plan on revamping other classes. Because I've gotten this hint from Valve in the past that, you know, people, and I've said this in other videos, that people tend to gravitate towards individual classes. So if you identify yourself as a Pyro main, you want to be able to play Pyro all the time. That's your favorite class. And especially for people who've only played like 25 to 75 hours of TF2, who are just kind of getting in and trying to find a class that best suits them, they're not going to try and play every single class at a decent level. They're going to only have time to master 1, maybe 2 classes at most. So if Pyro is one of those classes that you want to master, you want to feel like the Pyro is useful. You don't want to feel like the Pyro is a useless piece of crap that you're never going to use, or that people are going to like not want you on their team. That's not what you want. You want the Pyro to be valuable in all situations. Because as people progress and get past the casual and then maybe even into competitive play, right? That's why they introduced competitive play in the first place. They want people to play it. If you want people to play competitive, you got to find a way to make Pyro viable. You got to find a way to make that class work. And so what you're going to see, I think, is a homogenization of all the classes. I think that the classes are kind of broken down into 3 different categories. You've got sort of all around, like all around goodness, I guess you can call it. You got like these situational pick classes, and then you've got these defensive classes that can slow the game down when you need them to. And I think that what you're going to see, and if I predict this correctly, in that next Pyro update, you're either going to see like that situational, like either further situationalizing, I don't know what the word is, like putting Pyro into that box where he's only useful in certain situations. Or what's more likely is that they're going to try and cater to all Pyro players. They're going to try and give Pyro a little bit of everything in order to make Pyro players happy, so that no matter what situation arises, you can find a way to play the Pyro, right? I've seen it happen. I play a lot of World of Warcraft. They kind of did it in World of Warcraft where they give classes a little bit of everything, so that way they have tools that they can always have, so that when you've invested a lot of time into one specific class, you do feel like it's useful. You do feel like there isn't one flavor of the month class that you have to be playing if you want to be competitive. No, they're going to make it so that all classes are viable at all times, and you can just kind of choose which class you want to play based on, what your personal tastes are, as opposed to you're required to play with 1 medic on your team, at least 1 medic on your team. And you are absolutely required to have at least 2 scouts on your team, because scouts are the best class in the game right now. That's not what Valve wants to see. That's not what a lot of players want to see. I think that the vast majority of the casual players want to see a stronger Pyro. And so you should find a way to, like, if you're Valve, have these weapons that are in the game that are balanced, but give the Pyro a little bit of everything. They did it with Engineer, right? They gave him like abilities to be both mobile and also pick classy and also defensive. Pyro should have the same thing, right? He's already kind of got the defensive toolkit. So you need to give him mobility options that are viable, that don't require to use a single unlock, that like you absolutely have to use this one melee unlock, otherwise you are just completely useless. No, the Pyro should have other mobility options, maybe some interesting movement options, maybe make detonator jumping even more viable, as opposed to like what it is right now, which is that you don't get very much velocity or distance on your detonator jump, so it's not that useful. Something that I've seen that's really cool out of Pyros in the past is that rocket jumping, the air blast jumping, so that when a soldier shoots a rocket at you, you air blast jump and you can like gain a lot of distance that way. I think that they're probably not going to try and buff that. They're probably not going to try and make that better, because I think the skill cap, like the amount of raw skill needed to be able to pull that off, is just so high that most casual players probably won't be able to do that. So what you're probably going to see is just some sort of like flat bonus. So like you give the Pyro this thing that if you use it, it'll just launch you forward. It kind of reminds me of like a Pharah in Overwatch. She's like, you just push a button and it just launches you forward. Some sort of gap closer, right? That's what Pyro needs from the mobility section. From the pick class section, I think the backburner is interesting because it kind of reminds me of Spy. It's just that the Spy does that job better. If you're a Pyro and you have to hide in a corner, first of all, to use the backburner. You have to like hide in a corner, let someone pass by you effectively, or you need to do this like massive flank, either get behind the enemy somehow, and then backburn them and kill them super quickly before they have a chance to notice. I just feel like the Spy does that better. He can walk past you in plain sight because he's completely invisible, and then he just one-shot kills you. And then no matter what, after that first kill goes down, everyone around kind of knows there's a backburner Pyro or a Spy there. They're going to turn around and kill you. So, I just feel like they both kind of perform the same role there. I feel like there's probably a better way to do it that gives the Pyro the sort of pick class ability that he needs. So I do see that, again, there's going to be a homogenization of all the classes. Pyro is going to get certain buffs that he absolutely needs. And I think you're going to see the same thing happen with Heavy as well later on down the line. And this is kind of foreshadowing, but Heavy also struggles with the long range toolkit as well. He just really struggles at range, and he really struggles when he doesn't have someone healing him. And I think that both Pyro and Heavy share this kind of pain where, because you don't have those gap closing abilities, you have to be around a medic basically. You have to be kind of grouped up with the majority of your team. And that's why you have the Heavy just kind of slowly sitting there doing nothing, or the Pyro just relegated to spy checking duties, because you just don't have very many options otherwise. If you just run out there, you're kind of a sitting duck for everyone to kill you. So that's kind of my thoughts on Pyro. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll probably provide an update video once the actual Pyro update comes out. With the recent TF2 updates that we've been seeing, with the recent patches that we've been seeing, there hasn't been a lot of content, so you know that Valve's working pretty hard on that Pyro revamp, and so I'd look for that to come out fairly soon. Anyways, catch you guys on the next video. Bye.